beyond the pale. Wait a minute. You've got lawyers who are supporting Donald Trump and making allegations that there was fraud in the last election. No, we got to suspend their license, for God's sakes. Sickening. Yes, I'm a lawyer, but boy, do I hate most lawyers.
This is where freedom rings.
If you believe in America, if you believe in the Constitution empowers us. It's a new day. America's back. America's back, and America's going to get strong again. We're going to defend America, and we're going to defend our interests.
Liberty's voice, Levin TV.
Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin. This is Levin TV. Well, we want to have a fairly positive story to lead off with anyway, involving dogs. If it's positive and dogs, it's got my name on it. No, my name is not Fido. Is that the name? No, it's Mark. All right. This is from the Ellen DeGeneres show not too long ago, a few weeks ago. Don't worry, we'll jump into the scrum in just a moment. How dogs help turn a former addict's life around. Let's check it out. Go.
Your story is amazing. What you're doing is amazing. And I can't wait for more people to hear about this because it really does need to go everywhere. So you started out in a very dark place. Explain, if you can, in a brief amount of time, your history.
Well, my love affair with alcohol and drugs began at a very early age. For as long as I can remember, I could not live in my own skin, you know, and alcohol and drugs were the only thing that helped me feel like I could be alive in me. By the time I was 17, I was an everyday drinker. I got kicked out of college, started using heavy drugs, started selling heavy drugs, and just disappeared into a bottomless pit of negativity, self-hatred, and with no way out. And at 28 years old, in 2008, I started to turn yellow. I started to swell up in my belly, my ankles. I started to bleed from places you're not supposed to bleed. And I was diagnosed with end-stage liver disease. I was checked into Bakersfield Memorial Hospital, and they gave me 90 days to live without a liver transplant. I was going to die in 90 days without a liver transplant.
And the turning point was?
There were quite a few turning points. The first big turning point was that my dad never gave up on me. And my dad helped me get into the Comprehensive Transplant Center. Thank you, Dad. I love you, Dad. And we got admitted to the Comprehensive Transplant Center. They sent me home, basically on hospice, to the care of my dad and my dogs, to wait 6 months and try to qualify for a liver transplant. Then one day I was in bed with all of my dogs, and I had, soiled the bed, which happened regularly at the time. And I had to undress, which was very painful at the time. And I walked into the bathroom, and as I passed the mirror, I was shocked at what I was confronted with. I didn't recognize what I was looking at. This scared, yellow person. I remember making contact with my eyes and not recognizing what I saw, like not understanding who was looking back at me. And I could feel my dogs behind me. And I look back at them, and all three of them, Marley, Tug, and Buddy, are looking up at me like I am just Matthew McConaughey mixed with Barack Obama. There's nothing going wrong. Everything is going to be okay. Dad, we see you. We see you, Dad. We see you. And I hadn't seen myself for forever, And that day, we just decided that if I couldn't live for myself, I was going to try and live for them. And, it gets better. And so that day, that became the first day of the rest of our lives, and we just committed to trying to get well. So we just started walking in the mountains, started with my pack. We started adding dogs, adding foster dogs, and I couldn't get very far at first, but started to be able to walk, then hike, then jog, and one dog became 3, became 5, became 15. Walking in the mountains, I started the large dog foster program for the Humane Society and for Canine Canyon Ranch. And by the time I had 6 months of sobriety, I no longer needed a liver transplant, and Marley's Mutts was born.
That's beautiful.
Now, hold on a second. Now, this is a side point. Can you move that video back slightly? Just move it back slightly with everyone wearing a mask. That says a lot about our society, doesn't it? Does that not look peculiar to each and every one of you? They obviously handed out exactly the same mask. So everybody sitting in the audience there, they're all wearing masks, and they're all wearing exactly the same mask. That looks freaky to me. Very, very freaky to me. Just thought I'd point that out. Go ahead.
That's beautiful. So, yeah, and a lot of shelters won't take large dogs because they can't keep them in there. So
it's incredibly difficult.
So then you start positive change.
Positive change,
Positive
baby.
change. And this is the best idea. Explain what you're doing with dogs in prisons. Why didn't anyone else think of this?
Thank you, Ellen. I agree. Positive change should be ubiquitous, and it should be in every prison in the United States. In the United States of America, we incarcerate 2.5 million people. That directly affects 10 million children. In the United
Okay, hold on a second. You got me right up to that point. We incarcerate 2.5 million people. There's 2.5 million people. I assume the vast majority of them deserve to be where they are. We see what happens when we have phony bail reform and these violent people in particular get out of prison. And if we have violent people or people in prison who have violated the law and they had children, that's not society's fault. So we incarcerate 2.5 million people. No, these individuals did certain things that resulted in their incarceration. Okay? Go ahead.
Also surrender millions of dogs to shelters all over the country, resulting in more than 1 million euthanasias. It was our idea to create positive change, to provide hope and opportunity for incarcerated people and pets. They've been completely disenfranchised, both communities, for so long, and we have a real opportunity to provide hope and opportunity for them. So Positive Change is a 14-week-long live-in rescue dog program where we go to local animal shelters, high-risk animal shelters. We pull dogs from those shelters and we send them to 5 maximum security prisons and 1 girls' juvenile facility to live for 14 weeks in prison with their student inmates. We go in every week and we're training the Canine Good Citizen certification, where the dogs become therapy dogs by the time they graduate, and all of our student inmates have a vocational certificate.
By the way,
when
I
they
like
graduate.
this. This I like. Go ahead.
So they have something to do when they get out.
100%. So to date, we have graduated 650 students, 250 dogs, and 50 of our students have been released onto the streets. 0 of them have gone back to prison. That's 0% recidivism. The national average is 70%. Thank you.
I like this. And I also think there's another benefit. The dogs, oddly enough, humanize people. They humanize people. You have some real vicious, tough people in these prisons. The way they look at fellow human beings is really quite sick. And yet dogs or other pets seem to have a different impact. So that is all for the better as far as I'm concerned. So good for him. And it's good that he's alive. All right, let's jump in. We have this House January 6th committee. They've now subpoenaed several of the former president's former lawyers, including Rudy Giuliani. This committee clearly is not trying to get to the bottom of anything. It is trying to smear Donald Trump and his former staff, his former lawyers, his family, and others. They've actually subpoenaed Eric Trump and Don Jr.'s text messages. They want to know what information President Trump had. You have individuals on this committee, Raskin, who is a radical whose father had ties to the old Soviet Union. You have him going on and on about, well, maybe we can use the 14th Amendment if we can get him convicted of something, so he's barred from ever running. You have others talking about there's federal crimes. I heard Tim Kaine say this the other day, as moronic as he is, and of course he couldn't mention any. So this is intended to politically and criminally damage Donald Trump and anyone in his orbit. So in effect, this is the 3rd impeachment effort, if you will, strangely enough. Well, how else do you explain this? They're trying to stop him from running. They want to get him prosecuted. They're talking about, yes, there's many issues on which he can be indicted and so forth. This is exactly what the framers of the Constitution rejected. I hope you're able to hear my first hour of my radio show last night. Congress doesn't have a role in conducting investigations for criminal purposes, whether directly or to refer them to the Department of Justice. We already know the FBI and Department of Justice they are corrupt. They're corrupt right now. You can see Garland. Garland's a figurehead like Mueller was. It's the Deputy Attorney General. She's the radical, going after parents and so forth and so on. So this is a big problem. This is how NBC News covered this the other day. Go.
Breaking news just coming into us, actually from back on the Hill, from the House committee investigating January 6th. They are putting out subpoenas now.
Now, why is this breaking news that they're putting out subpoenas? Because the media want it to be breaking news. That's why. The media are all over this. Here we are again, Russia collusion all over again. Go ahead.
4 allies of former President Trump's, including names you know, Rudy Giuliani among them, Sidney Powell, Jenna Ellis, Boris Epstein, people who the committee says were promoting those lies, those election lies on behalf of Mr.
First of all, lies or not, they have every right to promote whatever they want. So what is it that they're putting together in this report? They want to do an interim report before the midterm elections for obvious reasons. What is it they're going to put in this report? That a number of people in Trump's orbit believe that Trump actually won and Biden actually lost? So what? Many of them have said it publicly. That they were encouraging his lawyers to fight it? So what? They're free to do that. I mean, this is really completely out of control, what this Congress is doing. You know, they violated the impeachment clause of the Constitution, violated traditions related to that with both parties. They violated the manner in which you go after a president who's no longer president with a second impeachment. They encouraged the appointment of Mueller, who had nothing because there was nothing. This committee worked with the Obama administration and then later directly with the FBI and the Department of Justice as Congress to try and take out Trump. It's just unbelievable, and it still goes on. Go ahead.
And who are trying to work to convince state legislators to overturn the legitimate election results. I want to bring in Garrett Haake, who is back on the Hill for us with this developing news. Garrett, I know we just talked to you on a different topic. This is the life of our Capitol Hill correspondent here. Yeah. These subpoenas, not shocking, right? Because these are people who did not cooperate with the committee. The committee wants to know what kind of planning and discussion was going on as it relates to the insurrection at the Capitol.
All right, stop. What kind of planning was going on as it relates to the insurrection at the Capitol? Number one, there was no insurrection at the Capitol. Number two, what do they mean what kind of planning was taking place? You can't just issue subpoenas and start grabbing everybody's text messages and emails and documents and forcing them to testify and so forth. You need to have some predicate, what they call a criminal predicate. And if you're running a House committee, criminal predicates are none of your damn business. That belongs to another branch of the federal government. It's called the executive branch. So when she says they want to know about the planning for the insurrection, this is again, an explanation that underscores the point I'm trying to make. They're going after Trump criminally. They don't have that power. They're going after Trump's people to see what kind of planning they had in order to take over. That's not their role. They should be questioning Pelosi about what kind of protection she provided or rejected when it came to this event. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And when you look at these folks...
What's exactly right? What a dork. Go ahead.
Particularly Giuliani, who was in many ways the face of the so-called Stop the Steal movement.
What? You don't start rounding up people because of Stop the Steal because they think the election was stolen and so forth. Or we put criminal crime tape around the DNC, around all the homes the Clintons own, around all the media, for that matter, what they did in 2016. I mean, this is preposterous. Go ahead.
Traveling the country, he was speaking to state legislatures.
So what?
Holding press conferences, including one in the parking lot of a garden supply store that is now infamous in the history of press conferences.
What does that have to do with anything? What do they mean it's infamous in the history? I don't remember any press conference at garden supply store parking lot. Obviously, this guy does. He's very busy. Go ahead.
Powell, Ellis were kind of the most notable spokespeople for the idea that the election was somehow stolen.
So what? So you're subpoenaing them to get testimony from them because they believe the election was stolen or they represent their clients' interests? What is this? Go ahead.
Donald Trump, and the committee says, you were out here saying this. We want to know what you were saying to then President Trump about it. We want to know what he was saying to you.
So what? Ay, ay, ay. Go ahead.
The problem that I think the committee's going to run into here, Hallie, is those three in particular were all attorneys. And they were all, and Rudy Giuliani will probably make this point the most because he was working with the president the longest, might lean on attorney-client privilege to not disclose their conversations with the president. So I expect a protracted legal fight here. But obviously, several key players right at the heart of the effort by the Trump White House to fight the election results of 2020.
Key players in what? To fight the election results of 2020. Gee, that's never happened. I seem to remember all the litigation surrounding 2000 election. Remember that, ladies and gentlemen? And again, the 2016 election. We had to have a criminal investigation of the president to figure out his ties to Russia when there were none. Remember all this stuff? That they wanted to interview the president and get him in front of a grand jury. Remember that was discussed for month after month? Remember the secret indictments that were under seal when there were none against the president of the United States? Remember all this stuff? And so now we have a situation where they want to get to the bottom of what was discussed with the president. They have nothing in terms of whether the president was involved in an insurrection. Number one, he was not, or they would have leaked it by now. And number two, it wasn't an insurrection. I'll be right back. Welcome back. I want to continue this so you can see what a thin reed these people are hanging on. You see them smiling, how excited they are, how almost celebratory they are. Oh, they've been subpoenaed. And what are they going to look into? What's the legislative purpose? They're conspiring with Trump. If somebody actually believes that, that's the job of the Department of Justice. It's not the job of the Stalinist Pelosi committee and all her surrogates. Go ahead.
You should note, too, Garrett, any resistance, I think, from the part of these four, right, certainly the three that you mentioned, is not just for potential legal reasons, but for political reasons, too. They are continuing to push election lies, right? They are continuing to talk.
Listen to this phony reporter.
The 2020 election having been stolen, despite the fact that it was, in fact, not.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, Jenna Ellis, I think, is probably the one who is the most outspoken now on that topic, is continuing to make political
Oh, we're going to shut her up, boy. We're going to shut her up. We're going to demonstrate that you don't want to be a lawyer for Trump. You don't want any association with Trump. You don't want to be part of this insurrectionist militia now, do you? Trying to overthrow the government. No. You need to throw in with AOC and Tlaib. Oh, yeah. You need to throw in with Omar. You need to throw in with the people who know how to overthrow a country without any violence. They just do it legislatively. They just take power they don't have. They just violate separation of powers. They just eviscerate the Constitution. They try and pack the Supreme Court and pack the Senate. Come on now. There's a way to insurrect and there's a way not to insurrect. What is this crap? So they can talk about not accepting the results of elections. That's happened many times in the past in our country. And the giddiness of these clowns and this reporter, this so-called host who says, it's not just legal, it's political too. I mean, she's still out there challenging the results of the election. And we know that Trump lost and Biden won. How does she know that? She doesn't know anything. Go ahead.
I mean, Giuliani and Sidney Powell have run into trouble with their law licenses. They've been named in lawsuits. I mean, they're already neck deep in legal issues from January 6th and from the...
And that ought to be a question, too. Why? Why are the bar associations going after Giuliani and others? They don't go after lawyers who represent known mass murderers. They don't go after lawyers who represent known terrorists. They don't go after lawyers who represent known Klansmen. They don't go after lawyers who represented the Weather Underground, who were bombing federal facilities. No, this is beyond the pale. Wait a minute. You've got lawyers who are supporting Donald Trump and making allegations that there was fraud in the last election. No, we got to suspend their license, for God's sakes. Sickening. Yes, I'm a lawyer, but boy, do I hate most lawyers, particularly when they get black robes and they think they know everything. Go ahead.
to the Biden administration. Boris Epshteyn is an interesting one to me here.
Yeah,
I feel like he's kind of the odd man out in this group.
I think we need to explain to people who he is. He's somebody who was sort of in and around as an advisor to folks in the Trump circle, kind of a comms type person, right, looking at messaging and strategy, et cetera, and was apparently involved in this discussion at this hotel that became kind of home base, right, for this whole movement. And that's what the committee wants to know about.
That's right. He was a Trump staffer for a time. Then he left and was a figure in the media world. He worked for, I think, Sinclair Broadcasting for a while. Don't quote me on that. He was kind of out there as an outside comms advisor to then President Trump. And yes, he is mentioned in here for his involvement in the Willard Hotel meeting.
Wait a minute. They were at the Willard Hotel. They had a meeting to discuss what? How legally to challenge the election results? My God. What kind of meetings did they have at Perkins Coie with Mark Elias and the indicted other partner, Sussman? Wonder what kind of meeting they had. Oh my God, did they meet to come out with a phony dossier? No, I don't think so. Did they use the Patriot Act and the FISA court? I don't think so. What did they do? Did they compel or force a criminal investigation? The Biden came in? No, I don't think so. Wow, they had a meeting at the Willard. We need to get to the bottom of that. What did they eat? They have a corned beef sandwich, a Reuben? I don't know. They have a full-scale 5-course meal. Were they slovenly? Did they use their napkins properly? Did they have tea or coffee? What happened over there? We got to know. Go ahead.
Up to January 6th, which has become so pivotal to the January 6th committee's investigation.
Gee, I wonder if the committee's leaking to this nerd and these other doofuses. Of course they are. I mean, they even were flirting with subpoenaing Sean Hannity. Oh, yeah, Sean was in on the insurrection. No question about that. All of these people are, aren't they? It's so sickening what's taking place here. And the media are disgusting as always. They're so damn corrupt. Then we have this guy, Raskin, whose father I've told you about. He comes out of this radical family. He's been on both of the impeachment committees and he's on the January 6th committee because he's a chip off his old father's block, and his old father was a Red. But he'd been a professor of the Constitution, constitutional law for a period of time. It's amazing to me. Shouldn't he be a professor against the Constitution or rather than of the Constitution? Well, here he is with a really hardball interview on MSLSD. Go.
You have said that the committee's planned public hearings this year are going to, quote, blow the roof off the House. What makes you confident that these hearings will have that?
This hearing's going to blow the roof off the House. How do you know? I'm on that committee. I see. Aren't you supposed to be at least publicly objective? You're conducting an investigation using subpoenas. I'm on the side of righteousness. I won't say God, being an atheist. I'm on the side of righteousness. I am, after all, a Raskin, and we know how corrupt this government is. Not us, of course, who exercise this kind of totalitarian power. No. We're going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to destroy these people. Trump, his followers, the Republican Party. They're spending American tax dollars on this. American tax dollars on this. These guys are going out publicly saying what they're going to do. We want to get Trump indicted. We want to prevent him from being president of the United States. There are criminal statutes out there, and this guy's out there saying, yes, this is going to be a spectacular public hearing. Look at the smirks on their already smirk-like faces. It's unbelievable. Go.
The American people. And how do you avoid some of your Republican witnesses from turning them into a circus on live TV?
Hey, you got to make sure when you do these hearings, you do them the right way so the Republicans don't turn the tables on you. This is this clown in his British accent. Hey, I say, how do you prevent these people from turning it on you? You know, the Republicans, you remember Ollie North, the way he did that? I mean, after all. Go.
Well, the first thing is that the Senate impeachment trial was about one guy, Donald Trump, and one crime, incitement to violent insurrection.
One crime. Was he convicted of some crime? Incitement to insurrection. God help us. I just hope this isn't the narrative for the next 50 to 100 years in this country, because the Democrats are working very, very hard to make it the narrative. Go ahead.
The mandate of the Select Committee is far broader.
Where did the mandate come from? This Select Committee. Pelosi. There's no real Republicans on this committee. Remember, the majority Republican leader, Kevin McCarthy, wasn't allowed to appoint his own members. So we've never seen anything like this, but that's the nature of Nancy Pelosi, Eva Pelosi. But remember, he says, this isn't just narrow like impeachment. The Trump, it's not narrow like Watergate just on that. No, it's broad. We can go after everybody and anybody for anything. And if they don't dump all their materials in our laps so we can use it against them, politically, of course, we will seek an indictment against them from our always objective and independent Attorney General of the Department of Justice. We will go after them if they don't submit. I am telling you, this is precisely what the framers of the Constitution rejected. This is a disgrace. Go.
It's much more sweeping than that. We're looking at all of the events of the day, all of the causes, and what needs to be done to fortify democratic institutions in the future. So we're looking at that mob riot, which surrounded a violent insurrection of domestic violent extremist white nationalist groups surrounding a presidential coup against the vice.
Wow, he's got it all down, doesn't he? He's a good little Marxist. He's got it all down, insurrection, white supremacists, a presidential coup. He's got it down, man. Go ahead.
And against the Congress. And we're going to tell the story of each dimension of this attack on American democracy. And the American people have not yet seen all of the evidence laid out in this way. So we're going to have hearings for the American people, which I hope will seem somewhat like the Watergate hearings.
The Watergate hearings. That's what we need. Watergate hearings, yeah. These are the people who oppose the Army McCarthy hearings, the Un-American Activities Committee. And yet, isn't this what we're getting in reverse? It seems to me we're getting this in reverse. This has nothing to do with the Watergate committee or the Iran-Contra committee or anything like that. They have a result, and they're trying to lay the stage, cherry-pick the information. They have not just a friendly media, a regurgitating media that slobbers all over them and can't wait. You saw the woman. Oh, yes, breaking story, their subpoenas have been issued. And it's really appalling how they set all this up, January 6th and so forth. I don't know. I'm very, very troubled by all this. And the pushback has to be strong. You know, I push back here. I have on Fox. I do on my radio show frequently. And of course, they want to suggest that I support the violent overthrow of the government and the violent attack on the Capitol. But it doesn't matter how many times I reject that. And I reject violence, period. It doesn't matter. These guys have the bullhorns, and they're using them. These guys have the soapboxes, and they're using them. This guy's among the worst of the propagandists. He learned very, very well at his father's feet. I'll be right back. Rachel Maddow, she gets paid a lot of money to be a very dense leftist. She really does. I don't get it. She was out there on the Russia collusion, so she had it all figured out. It never made any sense to me. It's the Democrats who've always bent over backwards for the communists and the Russians. So I never understood. So they want Trump to win? Isn't that a little weird since he's the tough guy? It was weird and it was a lie. But nonetheless, Rachel Maddow was a big proponent of this lie, like the rest of the media, but one of the leading proponents. She got rich off of it. Makes a lot of money getting no ratings on MSLSD, like all the rest of them. But she's on top of things now when it comes to voting. Let's see what she has to say, because it's so compelling. Go.
So Florida's Republican governor, Ron DeSantis, has just submitted a proposed new map for congressional districts in his state. What he proposes is that Florida should cut in half the number of congressional districts that are majority black.
Now let's stop. You see, the Democrats use the Voting Rights Act to help the Democrat Party. Maddow's one of them. They don't care about black districts or white districts. They care about Democrat districts. Democrat districts. Now, when it comes to districts, the issue is whether each person has fair representation, regardless of their race. She says nothing about what's taking place in New York, where New York's lost population, but they're trying to blow out 2 Republican districts. Nothing about what they're saying in Maryland that has one Republican congressman. They're trying to blow out that congressional district. And what's interesting is you'll see in many states and in many situations, conservatives and litigators for the black community on the same side. Because what the Democrats try to do is the watered down black representation to gerrymander a district to put blacks into what is, or previously, a marginally Republican or Republican district to try and take it. And you'll have a number of black individuals say, or various leaders in various communities say, well, you're watering down our district. So the Democrats have been known to do this too, and as I say, conservatives and sometimes black organizations on the same side. How does she explain that these blue states have lost a lot of population, but they're going to blow out Republican districts? They don't care. So they use the 1965 Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, not so much to advance the cause of minorities, but to advance the cause of the Democrat Party. Remember, it's like Martin Luther King's birthday. What did they do on Martin Luther King's birthday? They barely remembered Martin Luther King. They certainly didn't talk about his message in any significant way. They used it to push their power grab when it comes to voting, to undermine the Constitution, American history, to steal the voting process from Republican states, to centralize it and nationalize it so they have power forever, to turn the country into California. And they do that on the back of Martin Luther King's death. This is how they conduct themselves. What's happened in Florida is Florida has had a significant increase in its population. It's only picking up one congressional district, probably should have picked up two. It's got a huge increase of Republicans, registered Republicans in the state. A lot of people escaping from these blue states into Florida and into Texas and into Tennessee. And so what happened is the Democrats with moderate Republicans pushed for this gerrymandering that took place where that one seat that Florida picks up would go to the Democrats. And DeSantis said, whoa, wait a minute. That's not how we're going to do this. Every 10 years we have to, adjust our map. And it's obvious we have far more Republicans now living in the state than we did before. For the first time in the state's history, it's Republican majority. So it's not a question of reducing the population vis-a-vis the creation of congressional districts for black communities. It's a matter of you're creating more congressional districts that are reflective of the demographic change. The demographic change doesn't just go one way with an increase in minorities and Democrats. Some states it's going the other way with an increase of majority and Republicans. Florida happens to be one of those states. But everything's turned into race. 1965 Civil Rights Act is to be used only for the Democrats and their voters and against the Republicans and their voters. Go.
Texas's largest counties are now starting to report on the real-world impact of the voting restrictions that Texas Republicans passed this past year. As many as half the ballot requests they're getting from voters in the state's largest counties are now being rejected by the state because the new voting rights restrictions they just passed requires that those ballot requests be rejected.
Whoa. Why? Why? Did they not fill out the paperwork properly? Maybe they shouldn't have gotten them in the first place. You will never get the answer from her. She's creating images. She's creating impressions. And I have argued here and everywhere else, the media in this country, if not primarily, among the most responsible for the hatred and anger that they build in this country, including the violence. You listen to this crap day in and day out about how the Republicans are trying to deny black people and other minorities the vote, about how the Republicans are racist because they want to secure the border, about how Donald Trump is this, that, and the other, how they want to take the vote away from the elderly, from millennials, from people who don't look like them or support them, whatever that means. You hear this day in and day out and day in and day out, the Republicans, Trump, his supporters, quote unquote white people, become existential enemies. Enemies, non-humans. And you hear this not just from her, but throughout their media, which is most of it, from the so-called President of the United States, Joe Biden, and the Vice President, Kamala Harris, what they said and did the other day, as well as their leaders in Congress. They paint people like Bull Connor. They paint people like George Wallace. By the way, they're Democrats, who have nothing to do with that history, aren't like that in the least, because they don't embrace their ideology. Go ahead.
Half the ballot requests being turned away. In Wisconsin, where Republican legislators have been moving aggressively to restrict all sorts of voting methods, a state court judge just sided with them and ruled that Wisconsin can, in fact, remove its drop boxes that people use to drop off their ballots for the election. Wisconsin's next election is less than a month.
The judge said why he did that, and he had multiple days and hours of hearings. He said there's no constitutional basis for this. The changes were not made by the state legislature. They were made by bureaucrats in the state, in the elections operation. They were not made by the state legislature. That's what the federal Constitution compels, and I guess the Wisconsin Constitution compels. Drop boxes aren't an unalienable right. They're not part of the Bill of Rights. They're a rather new concept to help the Democrats. Because you see, it's so hard to get off your ass and drop a stamped envelope with the proper identification in a mailbox. You need a drop box for a ballot, something completely different, you see. Drop boxes. Well, if the people of Wisconsin want drop boxes, then they can vote for a legislature that approves them. Not bureaucrats. Bureaucrats do not get to decide our voting system, and that's what the judge said. So now the judge is part of a conspiracy, but here's what she didn't say. Remember they said all these lawsuits brought and none of them went anywhere? Well, there's a lawsuit that went somewhere. Right there. There's one, because the judge took his job seriously. I'll be right back. Welcome back. You know, ladies and gentlemen, I fully understand that this is torture. And I advocate for showing Rachel Maddow's show to the most vile prisoners among us. I think it would drive them maybe into civility. But she goes on. And I want you to see the other side here. I never watch MSNBC. I get these clips or on the internet or something. But it is really a place where the insane go to pretend to be journalists and broadcasters. Endless conspiracy theories. Go ahead.
Month from now. So they are rushing to rip out the drop boxes and give people fewer places to vote.
Nobody's rushing. It's called a lawsuit. The Republican legislature can't speed up a lawsuit. Judge probably wants to make a decision, makes sense, before the election, particularly if he thinks what's taking place is unconstitutional. Rachel Maddow could care less. She just wants Democrats to win. Go ahead.
With less than a month to go. Gotta hurry. People found it very safe, very secure, very convenient to vote that way as recently as the last election.
But it's not constitutional. It's not in the federal Constitution. The state legislature gets to decide. That's the way it's supposed to work, not the bureaucracy. Now, if the bureaucracy had made a different decision, you might not like it. There. Can we send that tape to MSNBC? Maybe I can get a 1 a.m. show there. Just kidding. Who would want that? Go.
Coming up quick. That must be stopped. Today in Washington, D.C., conservative Democratic Senator Joe Manchin appeared before reporters.
So he's a conservative Democratic senator. See the propaganda? He votes for Schumer to be the majority leader. He votes for every single, pretty much, judicial nominee that comes by the way. He votes for almost every budget that comes by the way. But he says, you know, this is enough. I can't vote for more spending like this because of inflation. Oh, you must be a white supremacist right-winger. I can't vote to destroy my own state's economy by closing all these coal mountains. Oh, you're definitely a throwback white supremacist. Can we see your teeth? How many teeth do you have? Oh, you must be a conservative. Go ahead.
I'll tell you, he was wearing like kind of a gym suit. It was like a tunic of some kind. I'm only saying that.
Yeah, I wouldn't get so specific about the way people look. Go ahead.
Jarred by his appearance in this next clip. He was at the U.S. Capitol, but he was wearing this like sporty outfit. I don't know. Anyway, he told reporters sort of scornfully while he was answering their questions that he and Senator Kyrsten Sinema working with Republicans to block federal voting rights protections.
Oh, voting rights protections they're blocking. Mr. Producer, I'm quite serious. Would you invite Rachel Maddow onto any of my media platforms to debate this so-called voting bill? Right here, Levin TV would be the perfect place. Seriously. Let's see if she'll join me and have a debate. I hear her IQ is just through the roof. There's nobody smarter than her. Nobody smarter than her except maybe Nicole Wallace. Nobody's smarter than Nicole Wallace except maybe Andrea Mitchell. Nobody's smarter than Andrea Mitchell except, maybe a turtle. Go ahead.
Will in no way result in people not being able to vote in the next election. He said that won't happen in the next election because the government won't allow it. I know you don't know what that could possibly mean.
So hold on a minute. The genius. So was the last election corrupt or not? The Democrats don't leave in place what is in place or was in place in 2020. They want to go much beyond that. That's why they're fighting the way they're fighting. They want to change our voting laws with the great mandate they have of 50-50 in the Senate and 3 or 4 majority in the House. And they want to get it done before their asses are kicked out in less than 2 years. So was the last election legitimate or not? This is the problem the Rachel Maddows, Joe Bidens, and the other unhinged morons have. Well, was it okay the last election? No. We need more drop boxes, and there shouldn't have been voter ID, and there should be this, and there should be that. 15, 20 other ridiculous things that take protections off our voting system. And why should you have voter ID, after all? Everybody's honest. We don't commit fraud. It's the fairest election in history. That we know. How do we know? Because I said so. So the question is this. Why do we need all these changes if the last election was so spectacular? Well, because these Republican legislatures are going back pre-2020 election. Oh, you mean to like the times that Barack Obama was elected twice? Yeah, it's so corrupt. Go ahead.
I know you think I'm paraphrasing him in a way that is obscuring what he must have meant.
No, I think you're an idiot. Go ahead.
But honestly, that's what we've got. That's what he said.
Senator Manchin, what would you say to voters of color who say that your inability or your obstruction of the voting rights?
There's no obstruction whatsoever.
All right, stop. What do you say to voters of color? Sounds like a white guy to me. Hey, Senator. Yeah, what do you say to voters of color about your obstructing voting rights? Gee, what an objective, independent reporter that is. Hey, what do you say to them? All these white Marxists. Yeah, what is a voting rights act here, and you're obstructing them? No, actually, you are obstructing school choice. You are obstructing economic opportunities in these communities. You are obstructing the ability of somebody in a poor community to start a business with your union requirements and so forth. You are the people who have undermined police forces and created so much, danger in these communities. But what's your question again? Go ahead.
A lot of people out there who are saying that you're making it so that they're not going to be able to vote in the next election.
How are you not going to be able to vote in the next election? There was a drop box right outside my door. Well, now you have to walk 2 blocks down to the church and vote. Then I don't want to. You're obstructing my ability to vote. And I don't want to get my signature checked. Just accept whatever I'm doing. I'd rather vote online or just send me a ballot. I'm very, very busy. How are we going to win the next war? I'm just wondering here. It's a great sacrifice to vote, ladies and gentlemen, to get off your ass and go to your precinct. Apparently, it's a horrible thing to open your wallet or your purse and show them an ID, which you show for every damn other thing. Can we see your vaccine passport? What are you talking about? Well, you want to come into a federal building? You want to go on a plane? You want to go into a restaurant? You want to go to a sporting event? We must see that vaccine ID. Wow. Okay. You want to vote? Yes. Do you have a voter ID? What are you, a white supremacist? But I have a vaccine card? Okay, we'll look at that. Sick. I'll be right back. Welcome back, folks. You know, ladies and gentlemen, I like the Tide. That is the Alabama football team. My daughter went to that school for an entire semester before she wanted to come home. But it's a really great school. It's got a great history. But now the head coach is an embarrassment. Not only did he blow it against Georgia, which was embarrassing enough, now he decided as a West Virginian, he was going to join with at least 4 others to try and pressure Manchin to throw in the towel on this Voting Destruction Act. ESPN writes, Alabama football coach Nick Saban was among a handful of sports figures from West Virginia to sign a letter urging Senator Joe Manchin, a Democrat, to support the passage of the Freedom to Vote Act. Isn't that hilarious, the name, the Freedom to Vote Act, rather than the Freedom to Commit Fraud Act? The letter, which was made public on Monday, also was signed by, and this really was an arrow to my heart, NBA Hall of Famer Jerry West, former West Virginia Athletic Director Oliver Luck, former NFL All-Pro Darryl Talley, and former NFL Commissioner Paul Tagliabue. I didn't know he was from West Virginia. I thought he was from Manhattan. Manchin and Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema, also a Democrat, and they go on to trash them. Nick Saban and Jerry West and these other people. It's a very sad day, isn't it, when the head coach for Alabama and Jerry West throw in with the American Marxists, the AOCs and so forth. Who do they think wrote this bill? And yet if you survey the vast majority of the West Virginians, they'll tell you they oppose it because they're smart. They're a lot smarter than the people in our universities and colleges. They're a lot smarter than Silicon Valley. And you know why? Because these are people, many of them, who work with their hands. They know how to put food on the table. If we relied on professors, and if we relied on reporters in Manhattan, if we relied on big tech, we'd all starve to death. So who's smarter? The people who know how to put food on the table, or the people who just keep blaring out methane and carbon dioxide, in some cases, I'm sure, carbon monoxide? So there we have. I just wanted you to know. So now my view has changed completely. Now that Nick Saban is urging Joe Manchin to support the Freedom to Vote Act, I said to myself, well, if Nick Saban supports it, maybe I have not been properly thinking about this. Nick Saban. If there's ever a guy that's been in the forefront of voting rights and the Constitution and individual liberty, it's been Nick Saban. So I need to rethink this, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe they should change it from the Freedom to Vote Act to the Nick Saban Act. Then many, many more of us would support it. Actually, he comes off like a jackass. I'm just saying in all honesty. Really too pathetic and too sad. I want to thank you for watching Levin TV, and we will see you next time.